Government of Indian Act 1858. The significance the significance act was enacted in the wake of the revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence or the Sepoy mutually the act known as the Act for the Good Government of India abolished the East India Company and transferred the powers of government territories and revenue to the British Crown. The feature of this act were as follows. It provides that the India hence fourth was to be governed by in the name of her majority. It changed the destination of the Governor General of India to that of Viceroy of India. He was the direct representative of the British Crown in India. Lord Canning thus became the first Viceroy of India. It ended the system of double government by abolishing the Board of Control and by abolishing the Board of Control and Court of Directors. It creates a new office Secretary of State for India, vesting with complete authorities and control over Indian administration. The Secretary of State was a member of the British cabinet and was responsible ultimately to the British Parliament. It established a 15 members control of for the control 15-member Council of India assists the Secretary of State for India. The council was an advisory body. The made Secretary of State was made the chairman of council. It constituted the Secretary of State in the council as a body corporate capable of suing and becoming being sued in India and in England. The Act of 1858 was, however, the largely confined to the improvement of the administration machinery which the Indian government to be supervised and controlled in England. It did not alter in any substantive way the system of government that prevailed in India. After the Great Revolt of 1857, government felt the necessity of seeking the cooperation of India. The British government felt the necessity of seeking the cooperation of the Indian in the administration of their country in pursuance of this policy of association. Three acts were enacted by the British Parliament in 1861 and 1892 and 1909. The Indian Council Act of 1861 is an important landmark in the constitution and the political history of India. The Features of this act were as follow. It made the beginning of the representatives' instructions by association, the Indians with the law-making process. It thus provides that the Viceroy should nominate some Indians as non-official member of his expanded council. In 1862, the Lord Canning, the then Viceroy, nominated their Indians to his legislative council. The Raja of Banaras, the Maharaja of Pat- Patiala, and Sir Dinar Rao. These are the acting member. It it enacted the process of decentration it by restoring the legislative power to the Bombay and the Madras presidency. It thus reserved the centralizing tendency that started from the Regulating Act of 1773 and reached result in the grant of almost almost complete internal authority the provinces in 1937. It also provided for the establishment of new legislative Bengal, Northwest, and provinces and Punjab, which were established in 1862, 1886, and 1897, representatively. It empowered the viceroy to make rule and order for a more convenient transactions of business in council of in charge on one or more authority to issue the final order on behalf of his department. Please like it empower the viceroy to issue ordinance within the concurrence of the legislative council during an emergency. The life of such an ordinance was 6 months. Indian Council Act of 1892. The features of this act were as follows. It increasing the number of additional non-official members in the central and provinces legislative council but maintain the official majority in them. It increased the function of legislative council but maintain the official majority in them. It increases the function of legislative council and gave them the power of discussing discussing the budget and addressing the question to the executive. It provides, please like my video if you like it. Nomination of some non-official members of the Central Legislative Council of Viceroy on the recommendation of the Provincial Legislative Council, and the Bengal Chamber of Commerce, and that of the Provincial Legislative Council by the governor on the recommendation of the district boards, municipalities, universities, trade association, jamindars, and chambers. The act made limited and indirect provisions the use of elections fulfill some of the non-official seats both in the central and provincial legislative council. The one election was, however, not used in the act. The process was described as the nomination made on the recommendation of certain bodies. Indian Council Act 1999. The act, the act also known as the Marley-Minto Reform. Marley-Minto Reform Act is known as 1909. Lord Morley was the Secretary of State for India and Lord Minto was the Viceroy of India. Secretary and Viceroy of India. It considerably increased the legislative council, both the center and provincial. The number of members in the central legislative council was right from 16 to 60. The number of members in the provincial legislative council was not uniform. It retained officially majority in the central legislative council but allowed, allowed the provincial legislative council to have non-official majority. It enlarged the deliberative functions of the legislative council at both but allowed the provincial legislative council to have non-official majority. Third, it enlarged the deliberative function of the legislative council at both the level. For example, member were allowed please like my video. It enlarged the deliberative functions the legislative council at both the level. For example, members were allowed to supplementary questions move from to ask subsidiary supplementary questions move. It provides for the first time for the associations of India with the Executive Council of the Viceroy and Governor. Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the first Indian joined to the वायसराय एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल फर्स्ट इंडियन कौन थे तो सत्येंद्र प्रसाद सिन्हा जिन्होंने वायसराय एग्जीक्यूटिव को ज्वाइन किया था अपॉइंटेड एज द लॉ मेंबर इट इंट्रोड्यूस अ सिस्टम ऑफ communal representation for Muslim by accepting the concept of separation concept of separation electorate. Under this, the Muslim members were to be elected only by the Muslim voters. Thus, the act legalized commercial, the father of communal electorates. It is also provided for the separation representations of presidency, corporations, chambers of commerce, universities, and zamindars. The Government of Indian Act 1990. On August 20, 1970, the British government dis- declared declared for the first time that its objectives was the gradual introductions of responsible government in India. The Government of Indian Act 1919 was thus enacted with come into force in 1921. This act is also known as Montagu-Chelmsford Reform. Montagu was the Secretary of State for India and Lord Chelmsford was the Viceroy of India. The features of this act were as follow. It relaxed it relaxed the central control over the provinces by demarcating and separating the central and provincial subjects. The central and provincial legislative were authorized to make law on their representative list. The central and provincial of the central and provincial legislative were authorized to make law on their representative list of subjects. However, the structure of government continued to be centralized and unitary. It further divided the provision subjects into two parts transferred and received. The trans transferred subject were to be administered by the government with the aid of ministers responsible with the aid of minister responsible to the legislative council. The received subject on the other hand were to be subject on the other hand administration by the governor and his executive council. The central and provincial legislatures were authorized to make law on their representative list of subjects. However, the structure of government continued to the centralized and unitary. It further divided the provincial subjects into two parts, transfer and served. The transferred subject were to administered by the governor. Fifth, the aid of minister responsible, the legal council, the reserved subject. On the other hand, were to be administered by the governor and his executive council without being responsible to the legislative council. The dual scheme of governments was, as Darchi, a term derived from the Greek word diarchy, which means double rule. However, this experiment was largely unsuccessful. It introduced for the first time bicameralism and direct elections in the cons- in the country. Thus, the Indian Legislative Council was replaced by the background legislative consisting of an upper house council of state and lower house legislative. Both of houses were chosen by direct election. It requires that the three of six members of the Viceroy Executive Council, other than the Commander in Chief, were to be Indian. It extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorate for Sikh Indians, Christians, Anglo Indians, and Europeans. It granted franchise to a limited number of people on the basis of tax of or education. It created a new office of High Commercial for India in London and transferred to him some of the functions he trade performed by the Secretary of State for India. It provides for the establishment of the Public Service Commission, hence a Central Public Service Commission. Was set up in 1926 for the requiting civil servant. It separates for the first time provincial budget from the central budget and authorized the provincial legislative to enact their budgets. It provides for the appointment of statutory commission to require into the report on its work and after 10 years of its coming into force. अब हम कल पढ़ेंगे सैमन कमीशन इन नवंबर 1927. गुड नाइट.